a mother who came to me during a conference and said, hey, would you pray for my daughter? And I'm like, oh, sure. And she's like, oh, well, let me go get her and see if she'll come into the building. I'm like, okay. And
that's weird.
Yeah. So I meet her. She comes back a little bit later after another session, says, okay, she's willing to come into the building, but she's only going to come into the lobby. And I'm like, okay. And she said, maybe I should explain. I said, that'd be wonderful. And so she says, and her voice she'd been kind of businesslike up to this point, but her voice cracks as she says this. She says, we were just a normal church family, but a few months ago, our daughter started dating this guy, and my husband and I didn't really like him. It just didn't seem quite right. It was a little bit weird. He's giving her these really elaborate presents and things. Just didn't feel great. But anytime we talked to her about that, she'd really be resistant and was really putting a wedge between us. And it even got to the point that she was sneaking out at night to go spend time with him. It's like, how do we even deal with this? But even despite all that, we were shocked when this young man kidnapped her and took her into the human trafficking world. And we contacted the police. They were able to get her, thankfully, but it took them 3 months to track her down. Wow. And she was 2 states away. And she said, we have her. She's back, but it's just not the same anymore. And my heart's breaking. I have daughters of my own, and just my heart's breaking over the tragedy that this family has gone through. And I said, of course, I'm happy to pray. And she went out in the lobby and said, okay, I'm gonna go get her. Now, as soon as she walked out, I started feeling scared, partially because I'm scared to just cause more harm. I'm walking into a situation where someone's experienced something really traumatic. How can I just make sure that I'm so careful not to cause more confusion, more hurt, more
like with what you see?
Yeah, well, just when you're in these kinds of worlds and when you're ministering to people, you are invited into a lot of very delicate situations, and you really want to be cautious and careful and thoughtful with people's hearts, especially when they are giving you some kind of position of authority to speak into their life. I want to be so thoughtful about the effect that can have one way or the other, and even well-intentioned things can be harmful, so I try to be so thoughtful about that. And I'm nervous because this is such a delicate situation, but also I'm nervous. And to explain this, I'm sure not you guys, but some people get a little nervous when they meet me because they're like, oh, he's going to see some like bad thing on me or some spiritual wound or something like that. I'm sure none of you thought that, but
no. I was been like, did you really pray about what you just said? I talked to Holy Spirit this morning.
I like the confidence.
I'm just kidding. He's like, there's a spirit of pride behind you. Cool.
Well, we'll get to that.
He did say there's nothing too terrifying in this room.
I wasn't going to pry open that.
No, but now I do see those things on a regular basis. Yeah. But the truth is, like, when I see them, it doesn't really make me judge the person. It only produces this deep feeling of compassion, because honestly, even some of the people that do some of the worst things, they usually get there, honestly. They usually get there because of tragedy, because of a deck that was stacked against them, you know? And so, and now when I see that stuff, it produces a kind of empathetic pain. Yeah. And I was just to be honest, I was scared to step into the kind of pain that she was going through. But I knew that if there was any bit of goodness that I could release in the situation, it'd be well worth it. And so to kind of take it slowly, I intentionally held back and didn't look in the spirit as she walked in the room. And again, she was only 15 years old.
Oh my God.
And so she walks into the room, and everything about her posture is speaking of trauma. Her hands are shaking. She's like in the normal rhythm of like politeness, making eye contact with me, but then like cringing away from that and like not knowing what to do with her hands. And just, human to human, I'm already just feeling the pain of seeing someone else in pain, and again, I have that flare up of like, how can I do anything other than just like hurt or confuse this girl more? Even if I try to be nice, this is just so much pain, so delicate. And again, I'm scared. It's like choosing to put your hand on a hot frying pan to know that I'm going to step into feeling what you're feeling a little bit, not 100% certainly, but but to some extent. But again, I felt this, again, courage. It must have been the Holy Spirit come over me, that if there's anything good that I can contribute to this, it's worthwhile. And so I kind of took the slow approach. I first looked at my feet. I looked down at my feet and started looking in the Spirit and slowly raised my gaze. And I made it to her shoes, and the blood from her spiritual wounds was running so heavily that it was filling up her sneakers. And I felt that first stab of empathetic pain, and it caused me to pull back and stop looking in the Spirit. And I'm just like, God, I can't do this. How can I do anything but confuse her or hurt her more? I can't do this. I don't know what to do. And again, that courage rose up. If I can do anything, if I can contribute anything, then it's worthwhile. And so, realizing I'd made a mistake before, I raised my gaze and I looked her straight in the eyes. And what I saw, it's been a few years now, and I still have a hard time describing what I saw, because though I felt every bit of that empathetic pain that I expected to feel stab through me, when I looked at her in the Spirit, she looked perfect. She looked perfect. There was not a scratch, not a bruise, not a mark of any kind on any part of her. She looked as clean and as perfect and as pure as my daughter did on the day that she was born. And I realized very quickly, of course, that I was seeing her the way that the Father saw her.
Yes.
And it's so hard to describe, because it wasn't like God had thrown this like coat of goodness paint over what had happened. No, his goodness was so profound that it could be fully and honestly in the middle of every bit of that pain and tragedy and trauma, and yet remain just as good as it was. That goodness was more than what that suffering was, than what that pain was. Not in a way that covered it up, but a way that could stand in the middle of it and still honestly see her as that clean, that pure, that whole. And so I did my best to try to express that in that moment. But again, the girl was in such a state that she didn't even really make eye contact. We didn't show a sign that she had seen or heard anything that I'd said. It did seem to bless her mom, which is good. But I walked away from that situation feeling a bit cold, feeling like, man, God, all of your goodness was there, and it was more than enough for what she was going through. Yet I couldn't see how to plug those together, how to speak that and make it true in that moment. And I've had a lot of thoughts, and people have given me a lot of thoughts of it over the years of, maybe it would have been unjust to the amount of tragedy that had happened to just remove that pain right away. That might have somehow been, not honest, for lack of a better term. Maybe it would be impossible. I did the best that I knew what to do at the moment. But I've always tried, whenever I feel that something I've done or something I've said has been less than up to the standard of God's goodness, I don't want to puff up. I don't want to shrink back. I don't want to try to make excuses for that. I don't want to beat myself up unnecessarily for that, but I want to just kind of let that sit and let that percolate. And so for years afterwards, 5, 6, 7, 15 times a year, I would think about that and think about that moment with that girl and think, God, is there anything I could have done? Is there anything I could have said? Is there some other way that I could have postured myself so that girl could have experienced more of your goodness in that moment? And I never heard anything, day in, day out. Again, 15 times a year, just pop up in my mind, think about it, didn't really hear much of anything. Well, I guess it was about a year ago now, I was out mowing my lawn, which I have 5 kids, so that's the quietest part of my day.
Yeah, we know, bro. We're addicted.
So I'm like, all right, we're mowing. This is relaxing. And it's a good time to just talk with the Lord, and spend some time in His presence. So I'm mowing the lawn, and without really thinking about it, I had that memory again pop up in my mind of that girl at that moment, that day. And again, Lord, is there anything I could have done differently? Is there anything that could have been different? And in that exact moment, I had this vision, and all of a sudden, and it was a vision in the sense that it was in my divine imagination. I wasn't seeing it with my physical eyes, but it was very, very vivid. It was like I was vividly remembering a movie that I had seen, but I hadn't seen it before. And in this vision, I saw the guy, the guy who had kidnapped her. And he looked exactly like the kind of guy that would trick a 15-year-old girl into being brought into the world of human trafficking. And, just to be honest, as soon as I saw him in my mind, I felt angry. I try to be a pretty forgiving, person, and I know I'm a Christian. I recognize like that God has forgiveness and redemption for everyone. But again, for me at least, I look at that and think, gosh, you can't do much more low than to just manipulate someone who's so vulnerable and to take advantage of that so crassly, so callously, and I'm just feeling that. And then I hear the Lord ask me a question. He says, should I punish him? And part of me is like, yeah, probably. But then, again, I'm a Christian. I'm like, yeah. And so I gave the prophetic escape hatch. I don't know, Lord. I don't know.
The escape hatch.
And then in this vision, behind and slightly above him, I saw his parents. And I saw the kind of people that they were. And they looked like the kind of people that would raise someone who would kidnap a 15-year-old girl and bring her into the human trafficking world. And I felt the Lord draw his hand across the two of them and say, should I punish them? And I said, I don't know, Lord. And then I saw each of their parents, and then each of their parents, and each of their parents in turn, until it created, as you can imagine, this inverted pyramid of people, back, generation to generation. I could see and understand this generational sin, alcoholism, addiction, mistreatment, abuse that had been passed down generation to generation, stacking the deck against the next group, putting them so far behind the line of goodness that how could any of them, hope to even improve this story, this cascading waterfall of sin falling down generation to generation. And I felt the Lord draw his hand over this whole image and say, then who should I punish? And the vision zoomed out just a little bit more, and at the bottom of this inverted pyramid, I saw Jesus hanging on the cross, and I saw all of this sin, generation to generation, passed down, that flowed down, that produced this young man and this part of his story. And I watched all of that land on Jesus on the cross. And then I felt something that I did not expect. That same sublime, profound goodness that I felt that day, that was more than enough for that girl's trauma and pain. I felt it pointed at this young man. I gotta be honest, I didn't like it. I was like, no, get that away from him. Get that away from him. That does not belong to someone like him. Get that away from him. That is not right. No, that's dirty. That's wrong. Now, I know that's incorrect. I'm a Christian. I know how the gospel works. But still, I could not, with honesty, resolve this disconnection between what he had done and the effect that it had, and that God had truly died for him so that he could experience that same goodness. And I kind of held that to the Lord. I don't know how to be okay with this. Not that it's my responsibility to be okay with who you decide to point your goodness to, but I don't know how to be okay with this. After a pause, with firmness, but with absolute kindness, he said, that's too bad, because that kind of goodness is the only kind that could have helped that girl in her moment of pain on that day. And I realized in that moment that something I can't articulate precisely what, but something in my inability to resolve how his goodness could be pointed at someone who I saw as so wicked, that lack of understanding was indicative of a component of God's goodness that I was missing, which is why I couldn't see how to release it to her in the way that was possible. in that moment, on that day. And so rather than just say what you're supposed to say of, okay, God, I forgive this person, may your goodness go into his life, that would have been a lie, you know. Instead, I said, God, you have to teach me. I don't know how to resolve this, so I need you to teach me, and I see that I need to be taught. So please show me. And that's a conversation that I'm still having till today.